where does the apocalypse, where do you fit on that spectrum from strike when the lightning of creativity hits versus show up every day, do the work, and then see what eventuates?
I'm definitely a show up every day and see what eventuates type of artist, for sure. I do have a practice of downloading inspiration, you could say, which is I live two lives. One is in the studio and one is outside the studio. And maybe there's a third life that has to do with sleep, going to sleep and waking up. Because I think about things on a number of levels. So every day I have tasks. I got to get done. I got to mint. I got to work on this. I got to structure this piece. I got to get back to mint phase. I got to do whatever I have to do. But when I go into the studio, it's its own world, and all these beings are in development. Or all these ideas are in different stages of development, and so I might be working on 5 pieces, but sometimes we work on 100 or more pieces at a time. And so when I go into the studio, which is 3 miles away, I really enter another zone. So that's the second kind of plane, and then the third plane has to do with like life questions, career questions, family, where am I going, what am I doing, questions about moving, we want to move, questions about the future, and those kind of are on the back burner. And I journal and I read and I study and I have meditative practice. But every night I go to bed with those questions, and I'm like carrying them, like burdens or like opportunities and possibilities. And so that's kind of the back burner, and that resides in me on a deeper plane from day to day, week to week, and month to month. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. So with all those 3 practices combined, stuff happens, man. Like I get drawings in the journal when I bring it out. I sit under a tree out in the backyard. I journal. Drawings come up from the night, kind of new ideas, fresh questions. And then when I go to the studio and I just dive into this and I make that, and then this other piece is suddenly finished, and then there's this accident happening over here. Like some of these pieces, like it's up here. I'll show you in the B-roll. Winning the Inner Wars. That piece, like a lot of pieces, was an accident. It's like a panel's lying on the ground, and I shake out my paintbrush, and splatters happen, and I leave it, and it dries for a few weeks or months, and then I come back. So it's just the discipline of all these things weaving together in a kind of tapestry, and then things drop out of it. Finished pieces come out of that.
So the couple of things I took from that is, one is that you have kind of ring-fenced where the creativity, where you put the paint onto the paper or the canvas, or in your case it's neither, right? It's kind of a timber finish. That's a physical place you go. And that's different, right? That even that itself probably challenges some traditional artistic conventions.
What, working on panel?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the practice, showing up every day and working day after day, like first of all, I wasn't able to do it full time before crypto art. But in the last 2 years, I've gradually been able to go full time, which means some days I'm in the studio 4 hours, some days I'm on and the physical studio. I have 2 studios. The physical studio, this is the digital studio. We're in the digital studio right now. But like on a physical day, I could be there 8 to 10 hours. And putting in that kind of time over the last few years has enabled me to just accelerate my practice significantly. To go from working, 10 hours a week in a studio to 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week in a studio just has accelerated everything. And in that time, I've pretty much transitioned out of canvas onto panel. primarily for practical reasons. I mean, I have literally worn holes in canvases. Like this piece. Oh wait, shoot, it's in the other room. Sun winds through. The sun winds through, like that canvas was full of holes because I had sanded it so many times. And I had to turn it over and patch the holes and then fill the holes with filler and then paint on the filler. So I got kind of tired of that.
Should I get it?
No, we'll show it on B-roll. It just didn't hold up. The canvases weren't durable, so I started playing with panel. Plywood is very heavy and really unnecessary in the end. You don't need 3/4 inch, right? So I started building these panels with like 1/8 inch, 3/16 inch panels, plywood. So I would build an armature with, with say 1.5 inch square boards. And I build a frame and the cross bracing, and then I would then I air nailed, like with a nail gun, panels on top of that, and then fill all the holes and the seam between any panels if it's a really big piece and I have a seam. Then fill that, and then sand that, and then gesso that, and then sand that again, and then we're ready to go.
And then on top of that, like what strikes me with how, what I've seen through some of the behind the scenes that you've posted through Twitter, is that not only is it quite a like laborious, strenuous job to get your canvas ready, to get those panels ready, right? Like a flat surface that is large enough for you to start painting on. But the part that strikes me is that you do a layer or do a couple of layers, and then you're scratching it back, you're sanding it off, you're actually removing it. So it feels like there's this kind of push and pull of you're pushing paint onto the surface, but then maybe the next day you've woken up and gone, now I'm going to pull some paint off. Do you ever look at some of these before they're in their finished format, and are you wondering which way to go, or do you hit it and then where? I know this is kind of an impossible question, right? But that's why I ask it.
So there's a couple of answers to this question. One is when I was really young and wanted to be an artist and discovered my artistic talent, so to speak, I worked across many different media. And there was something in me that resisted being a painter, because being a painter wasn't very popular in those days. It was a bit romantic. It was seen as self-involved. Shouldn't you be pushing the envelope of art, blah, blah, blah. So I did painting and sculpture and lithography and video and musical improvisation. And in all of that, I started to wonder, well, how does creativity work? And what I started to notice, and what I wrote my thesis on, and later my master's, was on sort of creative cognition. What's going on in my consciousness, in my mind, in my feelings, in the degree of habit, or the degree of, say, uncertainty or intuition. Or am I thinking in words, or can I learn to think without words? What does it mean to think in pictures? What does it mean to think in metamorphoses? So all of these questions, I spent like years and years and years tracking not only my physical process and learning tools like Final Cut and digital cameras and that kind of thing, but inquiring into the nature of creative consciousness, so that why? Well, it was basically I wanted to learn to make great art consistently. Like that was my goal, and I wanted to understand what artists like Goya and Rembrandt were doing, or Cy Twombly and Basquiat. Like, what are they doing? Maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, that in their minds and their souls and within themselves that manifest as this work of great art. So in that whole process, I learned that this uncertainty is at the heart of every creative act. And the way that I began to think about it was, if there's no uncertainty, it's not really creative, because by definition, there's certainty, which means it's repetitive. And so I started to look at thinkers who knew about uncertainty and navigated uncertainty productively, and studying that and writing that and practicing that and making art, but looking at, where do I get anxious? Where do I too quickly go to a solution? Where do I try to force, and how do I navigate this discovery process so that I get consistent results? And the way that I began to think about it is, what I was going for, which I can do now, is I know I'm going to get good results even though I don't know what the results will be. And so if it's not good, I'm not finished yet. And so over time, I've developed these physical techniques of basically destroying what's not good enough with the confidence and, in a word, the faith that if I keep working on it, even if it's painfully terrible, something will give and something will come from the labor. And so that's the long answer. The short answer is, sometimes works finish themselves in 5 minutes. Sometimes they take years. They literally take years of painting and sanding and sitting around for months and then picking up again and working on. And that's why I've developed the practice of working on so many pieces simultaneously, because I never know when a piece is going to say to me, I'm nearly there, slow down, don't destroy what's here. It's time to shift mode out of surfing uncertainty into feeling my way forward very carefully, because I might be there. I might almost be to the far shore on the other side of the storm of, the ocean of uncertainty. And so I kind of then creep up on it until it's finally finished. So I have these modes that I go into in my mind to navigate this and to make it all productive.
That's a great answer, because it strikes to the heart of that you have explicit cognitive awareness of your own process, and yet you allow it to guide you in a indirect way. So you're not trying to force it in a particular way. And I think the part that resonated the most there is that where other artists that may be earlier in their practice would find uncertainty scary and not knowing what the outcome would be before starting, or at least have a awareness of where it would go, you're very happy to let that uncertainty actually be the guiding light, because I think quite smartly in your practice, that toing and froing between adding paint and sanding it back off, you've actually given yourself permission to move forward and backwards towards things that work and away from things that don't work on a painting by painting basis, right? Some artists, they have to do one stroke of the calligraphy pen and it has to be perfect. So their practice relies on a moment of apex, of performance that is a zenith beyond anything else. It's live, it happens, it's then over, and there's nothing that can be done. It is either perfect or it is not. Whereas yours is more of this kind of gradual, like an accordion, in and out until you feel the breath is perfect. The layers are there, with the things that have been removed were never supposed to be there, and it reveals what should be there. So then that kind of leapboards into, let's make that practical for the audience. How does that then manifest for the Meings, for example? There's 4 volumes there. Did you know that there was going to be 4 volumes at the outset? How did the overall story arc fit with the kind of micro practice of getting the most out of every single work?
So you could look at creation and destruction as left foot and right foot. You need both. You have to destroy, I have to destroy what's not working. And I have lots of methods for that. Sanding is one. Dissolving gently is another. Dissolving more forcefully is a third. So there's lots of different ways to, say, add paint and remove paint, or if I'm working digitally, build layers, for example, in Photoshop or Final Cut or some other program, and then destroy or mutate those layers so we get different effects. So it's the same principle whether I'm working physically or digitally. But in that, the guiding light, so to speak, is, I mean, uncertainty hits me like it hits anybody. Like, it's just that I no longer think I'm a terrible person and that I suck and that I'll never be an artist and I'll not make it through. Like I think an artist earlier in their practice does. I think everyone hits that wall. Like, this is, I'm great. And then you actually start making work and it sucks and you're like, I suck. So I'm a little bit after that because I've learned to anticipate and structure for this period of suck. Like these paintings, I think they're beautiful now, but for 99% of their lives, they're terrible. They are not good enough. And there are some exceptions to that, Mint Face, but most of my work follows that principle. So in all of that, what really is the North Star is what I think of as, what am I trying to say? Because in a certain way, if art is not speaking, it's not art. Art has to say something, at least for me. So what am I trying to say? And there, like a lot of people have noticed, like, well, if you can just say it, then just say it or use words. So speech in this context becomes about mood. It becomes about imagination that is an image or an inspiration with a picture quality or a movement or vibrational or sound quality. A lot of times the sound of a painting is, or the sound of an image is important. Even if it's not audible, it's still like quiet or boisterous or frenetic. So I try to stretch into these qualities, but get their exact, a feeling for their exact quality. And so when I'm working on a piece, I look for I look for it to speak to me, but in an exact way, if that makes sense. Like it has to be a clear, it has to be clear in order to not be destroyed. I don't know how to say that. Even if it's clearly saying something that's not yet clear. In other words, if it's clearly saying something ambiguous. Like this piece, Wait Now, which I've just renamed to Now. It's a beautiful piece.
Volume 3, right?
Yeah, this is in Volume 3. It's the only one in Volume 3 that hasn't been collected yet. And it's a mystery. It's a mysterious piece. What does it mean, now? With this skeleton glowing and this aura and these X's. But that element of mystery doesn't dissuade me. Like it can, that's what I'm going for. I want it to be ambiguous. I want it to have multiple meanings and multiple layers. But it has to say something. Anyway, there's a contradiction. There's a paradox there between trying to speak clearly but remaining mysterious. And so when it comes to the meanings, yes, I knew that there would be 49 meanings. I like 7s and 12s, and so I thought 144 is too many, 49 is not too many. And in the very beginning, the name meing came to me as like the verb form of me. So I wanted to play with this idea that, okay, I'm making art about me, but I'm also making it about you. You're a me to you. You call yourself me. So what's the verb form of you? So this is the picture of you or any audience, any viewer, as a verb. In other words, in constant metamorphosis. You're constantly becoming. You're constantly changing. And so the pictures are meant to meet you on that path of change, of constant metamorphosis, and confront or delight or scare or humor or heal. And so the meanings all have these different qualities which are meant to represent different qualities of being on our journeys, on our metamorphosis, in our paths, so to speak.
And out of that path, like we talked very much earlier on in the interview around the where you get your inspiration from, the inner journey, but also the outer journey. I see you do a lot of research into the masters. How much of that goes into inspiring, or maybe not inspiring, maybe informing where that macro journey of meings as ego or as id, of how we each move through the world, how much do you are you informed by that versus how much are you informed through the journey you've already been on in life, right? Like you're not 16 years old going, okay, what am I going to do with my life? You've had experiences already versus the masters that had experiences and were able to bring them to life in a particular way. How do you balance those two things?
So some of the beings are almost like pictures of beings that I've met, that I imagine, or that I bring to my imagination with full intensity. Like the first one, Fury. I mean, in a way that's biographical because I had a lot of fury when I was very young. Like, not rage or anger, but almost the fury of destruction at a certain level, even as a child, because I saw the adults around me. I could see through them, and I could unsettle them with things that I said and the questions that I asked. And I had a certain amount of indignation if they didn't tell me the truth. And so I would, as every child does, make up my own mind about them and me and the world. Or grief. You know, grief is something that I've experienced. That's the second being. But it's something that everyone experiences. So I'm trying to go through the personal to the universal. So if I experience fury or grief, well, what is it about these emotions and these experiences that's universal and archetypal? But other things and other pieces of the beings, or other beings are more mysterious and singular. They represent certain specific people that have been important to me in my life. Like there's one called Samo, which was my portrait of Basquiat, because Basquiat was a big influence on me when I was a kid, but he died so young. He died at 27. And I was like, okay, I want to be like Basquiat. I want to be prolific. I want to have that kind of energy, but I don't want to die that young. I don't want to be addicted to heroin. What do I need to do to have that kind of energy and creative power and be prolific like that, but avoid that dead end? Avoid that early end. And so over time, the beings became both my story, but also like an imagination of a story that might have some relevance for you or others. And so I began to ask myself, what is it about this stage of the journey that as I go through it, I would have an experience, but if I were viewing someone else from the outside, they would go through that same stage or a similar stage and meet that same being. They would have to confront that in themselves. They would, like confronting the Sphinx, or confronting death, or confronting fear, or confronting their own possibilities or their own limitations. And so especially some of the, well, probably all through the meetings, but the more I went on, the more I was straddling this very personal nature of the meetings with asking myself, is this universal enough? Does it say something about, like the healer? Like, what's someone else going to see in that? Do you know the healer offhand?
Not off the top of my head.
That's the healer.
I like the delicate nature of the flowers that gives perspective to it, and then the drawing in of that thematic of the circle behind the head, which I think you'll know the symbolism better than me, but for me it takes me back to like the Renaissance paintings with you would have I think an angel would have that kind of circular.
Or the saints, the angels and the saints. I put halos around all of my figures because I think there's something divine or infinite or unfathomable about every person. So even in my my pictures of demonic forces, there's some sort of indication of their super sensible, their supernatural origin or nature in a kind of halo or crown or flames or just something around their head that shows in a way their aura, their nature. And there's a big spectrum there, there's huge spectrum of being for humanity. So I try to kind of go everywhere with it. In the meetings, there's only 49. The influx, that's the next project, which I haven't revealed that much of, but Aaron and I are working on it. We do explore a much bigger spectrum because there's hundreds of pieces involved.
Well, the part I like the most, and I think it speaks to what you were just talking about there with the source being the light or the glow, is there's actually the first word in the book, the Minted book, the first word of the quote on your feature is glowing. An inner activity, the skin is no longer a barrier, the world is no longer objects, the light within and the light around are one.
Yeah.
Your artwork, this is your quote, I'm reading back to you here. My artwork is about seeing the unwinnable and ongoing wars, the desperate messes and masses, the endless struggle and striving of humanity. More importantly, it's about winning through love, creativity, and metamorphosis in dark and chaotic times. So, and we've only got a few more minutes before we kind of wrap up here. What would you say to those who are in this NFT space and looking at a kind of the broader perspective and their own art practice, with the experience that you bring to it? What kind of positive, because Apocalypse is actually an inspiring positive message, not a negative end of the world thing. How does those two things relate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mentioned paradoxes and tensions and mysteries. I'm very inspired by that Rilke quote. I think it's in Letter to a Young Poet, where he's suggesting to his reader to live the questions.
Wow.
Like ask the questions, but then live the questions. And I think a lot of problems in the world arise because people don't sufficiently intensively live the questions that they have. What's that?
The quote.
Oh, you have the Rilke quote?
Yeah.
Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. And John Keats also has this beautiful idea of negative capability, which is the ability to live in questions and uncertainties without irritably reaching after fact or reason. In other words, it's structured uncertainty. It's the tolerance of not knowing indefinitely. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be, but I have found that it allows me to make uncertainty productive. Not only in the work, but in my personal life. And so in terms of artists in this space, the thing that I struggle with every day is, well, who am I in this space? Am I making a contribution? And I think also in part because we're in a Twitter world, not in a face-to-face world. Do others see me? Do others care? And those questions I understand and I live those questions, but they can also be maddening. One has to find equanimity with not knowing if or when one is going to be recognized. And to what degree? To what degree will this work touch others? To what degree will Apocalypse be well respected? There's only so much that one can do, I think. There's certainly only so much that I can do to make things happen that have to do with recognition or money or winning the game or being represented and having shows and being recognized. You can drive yourself kind of crazy with those questions. Ironically, I think the answer to those questions is to do the work. That's really the best response, because you can't control the other factors. You can't control how well you're going to be received and when the spotlight shines on you and how long it stays on you and which collectors. That's all out of your control. What you can do is do the work. And if you do the work, then things will happen. That's kind of my operating principle. And that's true, I believe. I mean, it's been true for me. But in doing the work, I mean, there's a lot of questions there. And the two that I would highlight for other artists in this space who could learn from my lessons, for example, is, do you make for the market? Do you make what you think other people will like? Glitch is hot, so you're going to go do some glitch work, or Xcopy's hot, so you're going to make Xcopy derivatives. I mean, that's totally cool. I love Xcopy. I love Xcopy derivatives. Eventually, though, I think you'll face the question of, well, what am I doing with all this stuff? And moreover, what do I have to say? What do I have to contribute? You could stress different words in that sentence. What do I have to contribute? What do I have to contribute? Or what do I have to contribute? And that's the hardest one. From, what do I have to contribute that's uniquely mine to contribute? What I really mean is, there is a certain maturity, there's a certain development and satisfaction and meaning in discovering through the work what it is you have to bring. It's not something that you can think up and then do. It's something that you do and then you understand it. And so doing the work is the fastest, most direct way to discover, by doing the work, what it is you are bringing.
This journey that you talk about, like I've been through this and had to question myself on it, right? And we've had chats via DM on like, Ryan, Mintface, you are like, why are you doing this X life? Like, what is this X copy derivative? And in my mind, it's like daily news commentary. Like when we look back in a few years, I'll remember what happened through these like old newspapers that people find when they renovate in a house, and they're like, wow, look what happened on that day. Like it was almost meaningless at the time, but it was the most important thing. Historically, you can look back at that newspaper collectively and go, look at the price of the shares. Look what the sports team was doing. And I feel that there is a duty and a contribution, in your words, to documenting this very emergent phenomenon that we're collectively exploring. But it is not my practice. It is fun on the side, as if I've got my media agency hat on and just producing some kind of fun, edgy derivatives of the daily news. My practice is more around loss and distance and separation through location, through geodetic moments, and they're much more contemplating, and I'm not even sure where it's going to go. I just know that to get into that space, to contribute to that practice, is a deep place, and I find it have to treat it with a lot of respect and be mindful. What is the next step in that journey of minting and creating? And a lot of the times the ideas just roll around in my head, or more like the feelings of what should happen next. It's there in the background, like it's a subconscious, it's just whirring away, and then it'll hit. Like the Geodetica collection, that took me one day, but it took a year to come up with the idea of what would it look like to go back on those 100 photos that I took of that period of time of the geodetic moments and get AI to interpret it through the titles. So there is a echo of me in there, because the titles describe the photo taken, but AI only got the title to decide what the image would be. This weak connection between human and machine through emotion of text to connect these two very different practices of photography versus AI. But it took a year to decide what to do next. And to your point, that first collection still hasn't sold out. So if I was to judge myself on success and collectors, then I would be doing terribly for my practice. Yet that's the most valuable thing to me. Yet the X Life does very well every drop because it is newsworthy, right? But can it sustain my practice? It's not even the same thing.
Yeah. I think, like, I wouldn't want anyone to misunderstand me. I'm definitely an and person, not an or person. I have a few rules, but I break those rules sometimes. But when I say that, what I mean is do it all. Like doing the work solves so many questions. Doing geodetic moments, doing Geodetica, doing the line, doing the X Life, do it all. Show up on Twitter, do all of this stuff. In time, the accumulation adds up. It adds up to something substantial. The minted book, which, predates the NFT yearbook by a year, is visionary. I think the line is visionary. All the things that you're doing, I hold them as like layers of substance. and those layers are stacked on top of each other, and all those layers together, there's a substantial amount of work. It doesn't all have to be equally good. It doesn't all have to be equally dense. It never will be. I know that that's not the way my work works. Nobody's work is that. Picasso's work isn't that way. But the accumulation adds up, and if you do the work, some of those layers are going to be gold. Some of them may be chalk and straw and ash, but some of them are going to be rich, dense soil for others and for you. So that's one thing that I would tell younger artists is like, play a long game. And I tell the artists who show up on my Discord sharing the work, I'm like, do 100.
In 100, you learn that you only get 2 or 3 hits.
Yeah.
If you're getting 50 hits, you're not aiming high enough.
Yeah, that's a good ratio. In 100, I might get 10 hits. And so the way that I do it is I draw, and I don't rely on the drawings. The drawings are greasing the wheels. They're movement. They're substance. They're nutrition. I have 1,000 drawings or 2,000 drawings that I've done over the years. They're not the core part of my work. They're an important way to get to the core part of my work. And in these paintings, the way that I do the same thing is they go through 100 layers. Not all of them. Sometimes it's done, like I said earlier, sometimes it's done in 5 minutes, sometimes just whoosh, but that's very rare. One of the insights was done in like 4 seconds, and that's insight number 10 from volume 1. But 99% of the time, they go through a lot of layers, and they look terrible. Now, for a younger artist, what I would say is learn to think like that. Learn to work like that. Like, learn to accept that most of the time you're making art, it's not fun, it's not beautiful. It's the things that like the sporadic hits like that, like bing, oh there, bing, oh, there's another one, bing. That's the point of it all. That's the magic. That's the gold. Those are the meanings, or whatever your jewels are.
And you're at volume 4 now. What are some of your favorites is this the end of the series, the rounding off with the volume 4?
So a new Earth is the last being, and Satoshi actually collected that. That was fun. He and I connected last year before he initially left the space. He was encouraged. He just loved my PFP, and he DM'd me, and he's like, "Yo, man, that's the best PFP in the space. Like, that's one of the best." And I was like, "Yo, we should do something like that." He's like, "Yeah, we should." But then he left the space, so it was good that he came back and collected that meeting. Some of the last ones in volume 4 are ambitious pieces. Mercy is a big one. Ambitious is the one with the woman, sort of with her arms outstretched, and below there's a skull that's hovering over the ground, looking up, and a very light halo around the skull. And there's 2 horses on the left and the right. Horses make appearances in my work. They represent will. Like, a horse is just pure power. I don't know if you've spent time with horses, but they are just 3,000 pounds or whatever, 1,000 pounds of muscle. So so that picture of these 2 horses is like a powerful will, and they're black, so they're mysterious. They're maybe horses of death or horses of transformation or something, but they're at peace. So part of the picture in Mercy, for example, is, I called it Mercy because it represents, after a long struggle, after toil and conflict and those unwinnable wars within the self, there's also the mercy or the grace of rest. And that can be at the end of your life when people make reconciliation, or it can be during life where I reconcile with a part of my past, or I accept a part of my fate, or something terrible that's happened to me, and I learn to live with that, and it transforms in me into wisdom. And so that's mercy. Mercy is about that infinite wisdom in the world that makes something meaningful, even of terrible messes. Another piece in the end, in the fourth volume, is called First Angel, and it's one of my favorites. It's a bridge. Okay, so one thing that a lot of people don't realize about the Miings is that there's bridges in the Miings. The general is in the first volume. That's a bridge to the insights, which are these pictures of skulls with light coming out of them and light around them. And the general has the same vibe as the insights, but he's in a costume of this gold filigree, and there's this like bloody scratch on his forehead, or his top of the head. And so First Angel is a bridge to a future collection called the Archai, which is going to be a very ambitious collection. My goal for the Archai is like 30-foot long panels hanging in museums that we would use a combination of hand-painted work with the studio, like More Than Me, but also custom-built printers that don't exist yet, that could print complicated patterns in pieces of AI. Because I'm interested in this integration with machines and the handmade and the physical. So the Archai, I'm going to start the Archai this year with modest-sized panels, like 8-foot, 6-foot panels, but eventually the Archai are going to be big. It's one reason we're contemplating a moving. We got to move. We got to have a bigger studio to make these panels. And I don't have the customers and the clients for that yet, but that's my goal. So First Angel is like a bridge to the Archai because there's this angel who's lording over this city. And in the background, there's a city of leaning buildings as if the buildings are crumbling or falling over or shaking. And there's the windows in the buildings are like little flames. So they're like human souls. They're little souls flaming up, or their lights on in the windows. And then there's red across the bottom, which is to me the blaring red glow of civilizations, the red light in the cities and the brake lights of all the cars and the traffic jams. So First Angel is an imagination of the future, a future state which is much more cacophonous and many more calamities among humans and in humanity writ large. But it's that future state staring into the present. It's a picture of a formidable being who's bringing chaos and destruction because some of the things that humanity is doing can't be allowed to exist. So this is a picture of a kind of angel, godly figure who's bringing destruction in order to purge the earth of human foibles. So it's a very much a literally apocalyptic figure. But it's one that fascinates me because I think humanity's kind of doing some things, and we have in the past and we will in the future, that aren't so good, that aren't wise, that we have to learn that those aren't good things to do. Whether it's war or when leaders lie and lead entire countries astray and millions of people perish and suffer. These are apocalyptic scenarios. And I don't think we're done with them yet. I don't think humanity's learned its lessons because we're still tinkering and we're still lying and we're still warring. So First Angel is kind of an embodiment of like, oh shit, we're headed towards a bad end, and that this being is warning us. It's just a picture. Let's see. There's also the pilot, which is a little piece, and that represents, in a way, quite biographically, my own father, who was an architect. But when he died, I had this image of him moving into the distance, saying goodbye. And so that's about all of our fathers who leave us at some point, and they become pilots in the stars or the heavens or something. So there's this image of, well, I've left the earth, I'm on to my next adventure. So what other pieces are there in that final series?
It doesn't have to be from the final series. It can also be from insights or ones that represented a turning journey in who collected your work, or potentially some of the things you've experimented with around editions.
I mean, a few pieces occur to me to mention in terms of those questions. They are meanings. One of them is Walking Through Flames, and that one Cosmo Medici collected. It wasn't even minted or for sale. I had just posted one picture of it on my timeline, and he DM'd me and he said, "Is this for sale?" And we made a deal for it. He bought 2 meetings and I gave him a third one. And he put my work in New York City. I mean, he said, I'm going to buy some meetings and I'm going to promote your work. I'll be like, great. And that's what I said. That was the deal. And he did. He put Walking Through Flames in Times Square. A lot of people love that piece. For me, it's one of the major meetings, but another major meeting is Between the Devil and Me, which is an 8-foot panel and represents that perennial struggle of temptation and failure to be your best self. You know, we all fall short of our ideals in some way. But Between the Devil and Me is kind of like that picture of grace where this presence says, you know, he may fail, but he's not doomed.
I like that. It's there's always a moment of redemption. There's always another path forward, and if those continually are not taken, the saying that I'm always reminded of is, I'm almost going to forget it now. What was it? It's around where you, in the future, you meet yourself, but the person you meet is the person that you could have become if you hadn't taken those other paths of temptation that actually took you away from who you were maybe meant to be, but more likely could have become if you were a full expression of your humanity.
And that is something that haunts me, dude. Like, I do not want to do that. So just, you know, you might not put this in the film, but you can if you want. But like, I had a visceral, I saw myself coming to myself from the future when I was a little boy. I met my older self, and I could see who I needed to be. And I could see that potential of who I could be. And man, I've fallen so short. I've taken detours. I've hit dead ends. I've failed again and again. But I still hold that image of like, well, even so, I'm not doomed. There's always a new path. There's always a new day. There's always a new opening. Who am I being right now? How do I need to be in myself in order to be the fullest expression of my humanity? So that's such a practical, really, it's a practical spiritual question. Which brings me to one last piece that I wanted to tell you about, which is the mage. So the Mage just sold to Mr. 703, who you may know. He owns 703 Punks, and he is a mentor for our friend Claire Silver, or a friend to Claire Silver. He's been a big supporter of her and her work. So I was delighted that he was interested. He made an offer, and I accepted it in part because it was him. And I'm friends with Claire. She's a good friend and an important person in our world. And I don't even know this. I don't even know if Mr. 703 knows that the Mage comes with a whole bunch of other NFTs. So the Mage is a complicated and dense picture of a path. So the Mage is walking and he's looking out at the viewer. And the first part of the path is white, and the second part of the path is gold, the third is black, and the fourth is white. So these are columns in the piece. And each of these columns has little miniature drawings stuck to the canvas. And then in the digital, we actually did a high-res capture of the drawing and inserted it into the final mint. So you can zoom in to these little miniatures, and there's a little worlds. There's like 133 little worlds in the Mage. So the collector is going to get not all of these 133 pieces, but some of them as little additional gifts as part of collecting that Mage, that piece. And eventually a full set of art cards of Series 1. So that's kind of another bridge piece. It bridges to the art cards, it bridges to the drawings and the additions.
I think that's the exciting thing with the NFT space, is that you can bring your creations to life and mint them, but you can also relate them to each other across collections. You can let the collector inform some of the overall canon. They do inform the overall canon in a way that traditional art struggles to do post the show, because there is this provenance in history that goes with the work, the dates for minting, who purchased. It becomes this fascinating kind of secondary experience of seeing like when you post it up on Twitter, here's the meetings, here's the 4 volumes, and here are all the collectors. That's your personal patron list that can be verified through the blockchain.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of a stunning thing to be able to do for artists and for collectors to have that co-creation of story in a way that has never been possible in a digital sense at the scale we are doing it now.
Yeah. No, I mean it is a new thing, and it's a beautiful dialogue between collectors and artists potentially. Like Mr. 703 might, if he and I had a conversation about that piece, and we like spent some time in front of it, he could say, "Oh, I love this little miniature. I want that to be one of my little gifts," and I'd be like, "Done." I also think Mintface of the insights. Now, with the insights, there's been 2 volumes. I don't plan to cap that. I might cap it at 144, but I look at the insights as this ongoing exploration. And whereas the meetings are the premier collection, and on top of them will be the archive, the editions are sort of the really entry point for Apocalypse collectors, which have been designed that way since the beginning, because I want entry points for all price points, right? The insights are sort of they're lower, but they're not too low. So the insights are around 1 or 1.5. They have been historically. So I want to have this dialogue with all kinds of collectors. The the ultra wealthy collectors who can afford a 20 ETH piece or a 50 ETH piece, but also the beginning collectors who are going to put $75, 0.042 into an edition. That's part of my and philosophy. Like, I want all of those collectors to find some relationship to the work and have a meaningful dialogue with me and with other collectors around the work.
I like how each artist can approach like the thing they're optimizing for. Like yours is layers, right? Like of how anyone can be part of what you create at different price points. And I contrast that into like very early on, I had to decide how do I want to present myself in this space. And I looked at the conversations around scarcity. I know from my tech background that digital is all about network effects, and network effects are about infinity. They're not about scarcity. They unlock resources by making costs go to zero. So my focus has always been, how do I get Mintface art into the most wallets possible?
Mm-hmm.
So my regard for price has gone. My desire to have max collectors is the guiding light.
Yeah. Xcopy said to me long ago, we chat every now and again, but he said, I just tried to get my art into as many people's hands as possible who cared about the work.
Right.
I wanted to get it into the hands of as many people who cared about the work as possible. And I think that's genius. Like, that's the way. Because with this technology, we can get the work into a lot of hands. And of course, we want to get it into the hands of people who care about the work.
That's the stunning part of it. Like, I live in New Zealand. We're a country of 5 million people. The ability to get into the homes through art and selling, you might get maybe 1,000 in your whole career. And it makes me chuckle that as someone who has shifted back to art, to have, I got like 2,200 something collectors. In the traditional world, that's like impossible, right? That in New Zealand, it does not happen. Even the greats here, like the Rita Angus's, the Colin McCanns, I do not think they're at that level. And
No.
So I'm just fascinated where this space goes when, like when we look back at the scientists that contributed to splitting the atom, discovering plutonium. They're all doing their individual thing, but collectively they built something which created unlimited energy, a force for good, but also unlimited destruction at a time that actually maybe it resolved unlimited destruction too. And I'm curious, like collectively in 20 years, when people look back, like really, like I'm not an art historian, right? So I don't have that knowledge like you or other people who have been in this space for many, many years. But I'm curious to see collectively, what have we created? What are we creating? And how does that shift, not just the culture, but how does that culture inform how we live in the ways that when we uncovered things through science, which was creativity and being comfortable in the unknown and the uncertain, and then the discovery happened, what are we discovering here? And I'm not sure any of us know yet.
No, I'm not sure we know either. I mean, I do have a view of that, which is somewhat apocalyptic, which is that we're tinkering and we're discovering with these computers something that's going to be part of our evolution for a long time. And with AI, we're going to see unlimited computational power. And ultimately, all kinds of technologies that we can't imagine from here at all. And the big looming question is, will we use it wisely? And I think we're going to do both. I think we're going to learn to use technology wisely, but we're also going to your point, use technology unwisely or for evil or with great harm. So that's kind of written in the stars. I think it's kind of written on the walls. Like that's what's part of what's happening in a big picture sense. What I try to contribute in this space is if we're gonna take that on, we got to take our full humanity into the future with us, including the mystery aspects, the parts of ourselves that are secret or quiet or that we don't reveal, the fullness of our humanity, to use your words. So I'm about embracing it. I want to embrace the future and all of its dark and light aspects. But I want to do it with others, and I want to do it creatively, and I want to do it with joy and fearlessness and creativity. So, let's fucking go. It's one of those things.
This has been a great chat, APOC. Like, we've done like 2 Zooms worth now, and I'm kind of in awe of how much I've learned about your work and about how much commitment you've got to your practice. So I appreciate your time and to be able to share this with the kind of the crypto art audience. It's going to be magic.
Good, dude. I'm so happy. Well, on a personal note, I'm glad that you're interested. I'm thrilled to share my work and my process and my vision. And Iron is helping in the Apocalypse Studio. She's here in the background, but my other daughter as well. So it's turning into this sort of family enterprise. But we are so excited to be in this space and to offer our contribution. Personally, I've always thought one day you and I are going to hang out. And we're going to be at a place where we can just chill for a few days and make art and have chats and eat meals. So that day is going to come. And this is just the beginning. So thank you for being here, for being interested in me, and for just showing me the love and respect over the last year or two. I feel the same about you. So I appreciate you and I thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you back. We'll have to continue, as we always do, the chat via the DM.
We will.
That's great.
Yeah, it was great. We got less than a minute, so we're going to die out pretty soon.